When love fades and shared memories can't mend the cracks, Jason and Jill Crawford stand on the threshold of a new life. Jill wanted new sensations, and she got them. She faced severe karma. Jason and Jill Crawford were feeling somber, as the three passengers in Jason's speeding car headed to DFW remained in chilly silence. Jason was thinking, "I've done everything I can to rekindle my wife's love, but nothing has worked. I have a bad feeling about today." Meanwhile, Jill thought, "Oh boy." With Jason off traveling to the branch office handling crises, I've had plenty of time with my lover. Hot dog. Later, the parents said their goodbyes to their youngest child at the airport. Their daughter gave a brief hug to both of them and hurried into the TSA line 2 hours before her flight. She had earned a National Merit Scholarship and was set to attend a denominational college in the East. As they stood beside her in line, Jason said to his daughter, "Penny, you have a backup Visa card for emergencies, and the rest of your finances should be manageable. Do you think you can handle being in a new and unfamiliar place?" "Yes, Dad and Mom, it shouldn't be a problem," the young woman replied, moving forward in the TSA line while barely hiding her boredom and eagerness for the farewells to be over. Eventually, the daughter disappeared from sight, and the couple silently made their way to central parking. Jason pondered, "How will Jill and I cope with each other day after day, clashing like strangers in our spacious 4-bedroom house? Or are we even truly going to cope with each other? I've long suspected she's been close to her piano teacher, and if that's true, she must find the courage to end our 22-year-long, unfulfilling marriage." Later, while driving home, Jill remarked, "Jason, with our youngest child leaving, it marks a significant moment in our lives and relationship. We both know we've been unhappy together for many years. I recognize that we've both made efforts, especially you, to revive what we once had, but it's impossible. I want a divorce." Her husband remained calm, having sensed Jill's unhappiness for a long time and having mentally prepared for this day a year ago. Jason Crawford, embarking on his second career, worked in computer systems and was tasked with maintaining the connectivity of regional insurance offices through high-speed communications. Dealing with proprietary software used by agents, salespeople, and accounting departments across 12 branch offices was his ongoing challenge. The complex software, developed in India by a now-defunct company, had become his arch-enemy, though it did ensure his continued employment. Each branch office employed at least one trained and experienced computer science graduate. Top management was hesitant to outsource the costly, problematic software to another firm, whether domestic or international, citing budget constraints. The typical board meeting rationale was, like throwing good money after bad. Consequently, each branch struggled by implementing necessary fixes as issues arose, or by calling Jason Crawford from the main office. Users frequently complained about trying to make the computer work daily, instead of concentrating on their primary tasks. Jason occasionally flew to 9 cities in the South and Southwest and commuted by car from the Dallas home office to their Fort Worth branch. His expertise was often required before the workday started to patch the kludge and keep the software operational. That day, while in their car, Jason said to his wife, "I understand you've been unhappy for over 2 years, Jill, so now is as good a time as any to consider a divorce. How would you like to proceed?" Jill was both stunned and relieved by her husband's indifferent attitude. She thought, he really doesn't care either way. I wonder how he'd react if I told him about Harrison, my lover. There's no need to tell him because he'd just say, "It's your problem, Jill, not mine." Damn that arrogant jerk, Jason. He's always so self-assured compared to most men. She then responded, "You wanted to downsize, so let's sell the house, split everything 50-50, and equally contribute to our children's education expenses. Is that okay?" Jason replied, That sounds fair to me. I'm driving to Fort Worth tomorrow morning and need to be at our office by 8 a.m. Could you ask our attorney to draft the petition, and we can discuss it when I return late tomorrow afternoon? She answered cynically, Yes, dear, I'll take care of it just like I handle everything else. Jill worked as an actuary and aspired to become a partner soon at the international firm where she was employed. Both she and her husband had roughly equal balances in their individual 401k accounts, and their combined adjusted gross income last year exceeded $200,000. In her mid-40s, Jill was still attractive, boasting a voluptuous figure with a slim waist. Her self-esteem expected daily attention from men in their 20s and 30s, as was customary, to help her unwind. However, only Raleigh Harrison, her 23-year-old jazz piano teacher and lover, had successfully captivated her since she began lessons with him 2 years prior. Raleigh would visit the Crawford household once or twice each week to provide instruction. Early the next beautiful fall morning, Jason was awakened by his alarm clock. He realized Jill wasn't in bed. As a tech professional, he quickly prepared and grabbed his overnight bag before rushing downstairs. He overheard his wife speaking on the phone, saying, "Can you come over after your last class today? Jason will have a long day in Fort Worth and will be working late." After a brief pause, she added, "Great. See you around 4 o'clock then." Jason stood at the counter, reviewing a technical document while brewing a cup of coffee. Jill, surprised to see him up so early, mentioned, "I have a piano lesson at 4 o'clock today." He responded casually, "Have fun, dear," as he closed the paper coffee cup and grabbed his day bag. "Drive safely if you're heading to the office," he added with a cynical gesture, touching his lips and blowing a kiss to his distant wife before heading toward the garage door. For the first time, Jill experienced a chill that swept through her entire body. She pondered introspectively, "Are you prepared to perform solo? After 22 years of marriage, does my husband care so little that he doesn't even consider what caused our separation? I'm 44, and my age is starting to become apparent, increasing each day. How long will a pianist in his mid-20s who plays in nightclubs stay interested in a woman like me who has no skill at the keyboard? And can I compete with his students while he conducts numerous private lessons?" Jason Crawford, who was now retreating from his garage, held the title of Dr. Crawford because he earned a Ph.D. in modern languages and had spent 10 years teaching French verbal exercises and literature at a local college. However, within the insurance industry, his colleagues had overlooked his academic background and his youthful years spent living in France. As a tenured professor, he had noticed years earlier that foreign languages were becoming extinct on campuses. Declining enrollment numbers pushed him to first obtain an MS and subsequently a Ph.D. in computer science. Jill and Jason collaborated to further their education and to be responsible parents to their young children. However, over time, their marriage transformed into a relationship devoid of love, but reliant on mutual dependence. One early morning while driving to Fort Worth, Jason mused aloud to himself, "Did Jill and I ever truly love each other, or did we simply support one another to make ends meet? I guess there was passion once, but love has faded, and I can't pinpoint when or how that happened." Jason arrived at the Fort Worth branch of his insurance company roughly 10 minutes before 8 a.m. The entrance remained locked during the early morning hours, but exactly at 8, the branch manager, Marvin Banks, who had advanced through the company via sales, approached with a smile and unlocked the door. Banks was a skilled salesperson with a formidable reputation, often boasting, "Every day is an up day." In Jason's view, Marvin wasn't the most effective manager, but he was an outstanding salesman. Both the agents and the company's sales team held him in high regard. He remarked, "Hey, we're honored to have a visit from headquarters today. Sometimes I wonder if you guys sabotage the damn computers to secure your jobs. Come on in. I'll brew a pot of coffee right away." Responding to Banks's joke, Jason said, "Marvin, you know I have to tinker with the computers every week just to afford my kids' college with all this overtime. Can you cut me some slack, will ya?" Marvin chuckled and replied, "Honestly, I think our overtime pay is about the same. Pour yourself a cup, and once you're done, take a seat because I have an 8 a.m. conference call." Banks then left the break room. Around that time, the IT manager entered the break room, rubbing his eyes. Techie Harry Brown exclaimed, "Damn, that coffee smells great." He poured himself a cup, sat down, and looked at Jason, asking, "It's been over 3 months since you've been here, so why now?" Jason smiled, cracked a couple of jokes, and then said, "The CIO has noticed that there are very few complaints from laptop or desktop users about your proprietary software installations. She wants me to figure out what the hell you people are doing, fix it, document it, recompile it, and distribute it to each site." Harry Brown exploded. "Tell that Chihuahua Bit H that if she would authorize each location to hire enough technical staff, then nobody would have any significant problems." Jason responded, "Sure, I'll make a note of that, knowing that reaching out to my congressman and speaking with her will accomplish nearly the same thing. In the meantime, your system is more often operational than not across the workstations and the server. Plus, you're using the same lousy software that our renowned CIO, Chihuahua, outsourced to India for development, just like everyone else. So what's the real difference?" At that moment, a remarkably beautiful Asian woman entered the break room. She smiled at both men and greeted the unfamiliar man with a nod. She moved towards the tea and coffee machine, ignoring the two men as she poured herself a cup. After that, she left the room, sipping her hot tea. Harry Brown then said, "The difference has just left the room, Jason. In this building, whenever she walks into a room, all us men first admire her technical skills and then enter a seduction mode. Even though she's a temporary clerical employee from an agency on a 90-day contract, she immediately started troubleshooting computers. Then Marvin Banks assigned her to work for me. I and about half a dozen other men in this building have been infatuated with her since she arrived. Jason, I know you're an older married man, so keep your composure. And besides, she's too young for you anyway." "Harry, let's go to your office and discuss this," Jason said. Once there, he added, "You and Banks are not authorized to hire technical staff." The IT technician smirked condescendingly and responded, "I'm aware of that. From Dallas's perspective, she's just typing and filing. Please don't inform the little bit H, all right?" The visiting IT manager exclaimed, "Damn it, Harry. Assigning a paper shuffler as a tech doesn't make any sense. If word of what you're doing reaches the Chihuahua, you're—" Harry stood up angrily and declared, "Fine. We have an issue, and I've resolved it. Hey." He suddenly sat back down. "I just remembered something. You used to speak French in your previous life, didn't you?" "Yes, I lived in France and taught French language and literature for many years while learning to hack computers. I completed my education and landed this real job." "So what?" Harry grinned as if he had just cracked the national debt and said, "Jason, her English is about as good as my French, practically non-existent. However, you could understand her explanations of the code issues and her solutions, and you and Annie Ngo could document and recompile it for all branches. Then you could persuade the Chihuahua to give her a hefty bonus. I've tried talking to her but found it impossible except by using street slang. But you and she could make the flawed program foolproof." Jason replied, "I owe you, Harry. Would you mind introducing me to Ms. Annie Ngo? Afterwards, could you work somewhere else for a while?" Harry nodded and left. About 3 minutes later, Harry and Annie Ngo walked through Brown's open office door. Jason jumped to his feet like a popcorn kernel as she walked in, moving as if she were modeling clothes on a runway. During the introductions, Jason was initially shocked when she approached his side of the desk uninvited, coming right up to the home office guru, and extended her hand in greeting. Her captivating smile never faded. She showed warmth toward Jason by looking directly into his eyes while flashing her brilliantly white teeth and said, "Thanks for talking to me, Mr. Crawford." Jason seated himself by gripping his desk and gestured for her to take a seat across from him, as Harry courteously excused himself and left the room. Smiling, Jason began speaking in French. "It's great to meet someone who identifies and resolves issues proactively. We're very fortunate to have you brought in from a temp agency. How long are you scheduled to work with us, Miss Ngo?" She responded in French, seemingly unaware she was using the language, saying, "It's a 3-month open-ended contract and I've been here for about 2 months. Jason continued, "What responsibilities has Harry assigned to you now that our unreliable software installations are mostly functioning for our users at this location?" She chuckled and replied, "Handling help desk calls, which involves training the users. And between those calls, I'm teaching myself additional programming languages. I believe being versatile across multiple platforms is the future. I'm also improving my English because I'm seeking a contract position in software development that utilizes one of the 4 languages I know. Right now, I would feel embarrassed interviewing due to my English skills." He then asked, "You've clearly reviewed the source code provided by the previous developer, so what are some of the main issues?" They engaged in a 2-hour technical discussion, after which Annie used a French expression. The bottom line is that the rapid access development software tool wasn't the right choice, and they ended up with a makeshift solution. "Your company didn't get its money's worth, Mr. Crawford. I've patched the code in 3 areas to ensure it works most of the time in the Fort Worth office." Jason remarked, "Wow. The CIO, we call her the Chihuahua, must have had a rough day when she signed the original contract with the Indian firm, and I might have a tough time after I indirectly explained to her mistake." Annie smiled, feeling more at ease with this older man, and said, "I don't envy you." Jason then said, "Could you take an early lunch so I can treat you?" Switching to English, Annie replied, "Thank you very much, sir, if you will help me practice my English. Did I say that correctly?" They both laughed, and Jason, also speaking in English, responded, "I think that line is from Conversational English for Foreigners, and you nailed it." They began discussing current events in English to help her as a student. About an hour later, it was time for lunch, and he asked, "Are you ready for some food and drinks?" During lunch, Jason spoke to Annie in French from across the table, saying, "You are truly an extraordinary person, Annie. How did you end up sitting here with me?" Annie felt immediately pleased by his interest and responded, "I received a scholarship to attend the University of Strasbourg while I was a senior in high school in Hanoi. Both of my parents were officials in the Vietnamese government, and my father also held a career position with the U.S. government simultaneously. They covered my travel and other related expenses for my education in France. My ultimate goal was to move to either the U.S. or Canada. So, while I was in France, I met an American man." Jason asked, "What kind of man?" Annie smiled and replied, "He was a student at a denominational college in Dallas and had come to France for the summer through a French immersion program. I met and attracted him, and we got married because he wanted to bring me back with him. I was pregnant at the time." Jason said, "He must have succeeded since you're here. Please continue." She went on, "Yes, but I think his conscience began to trouble him because every morning he woke up next to an attractive woman he couldn't communicate with. Only using the basic French he had learned in his immersion program, he even started to believe that I had become pregnant on purpose to trap him, which wasn't true. After we settled in Arlington, I joined his church and 2 years later started an affair with a deacon there. My ex-husband found out and divorced me, but he still provides generous child support and temporary alimony since I was unemployed and not yet a citizen at the time. Practically, I was unemployable because of my limited English. So, with my ex-husband's checks, my mother's modest death benefit pension from the U.S. government, and working temporary jobs, I managed to get by. Oh, let me explain further. My father died under mysterious circumstances, and my mother moved here because she won a spot in the immigration lottery. Jason responded, "Let me see if I understand. Your father was murdered by his own government because they discovered he was employed by our government, and our government helped your mother leave Vietnam." Annie straightened up, her expression initially showing a hint of worry. Then she broke into a wide smile, finally letting her guard down completely. For 2 minutes, the room was silent until the waitress came back to check on their meals. Annie gave Jason a warm glance and recited a phrase from her conversational English class, saying, "See no evil, hear no evil, do no evil." Switching back to French, she added, "You're more savvy than the average techie. I'm impressed. You have no idea how wonderful it is to befriend someone who understands complexity to its core, both technically and socially, actually." Jason suddenly felt an uneasy urge to embrace the woman in her late 20s and remarked, "I'm different from most men because I have both a liberal arts and a technical education, so my perspective is unique. However, it's getting late, and I need to get you back to the office. Where do you live, Annie?" "I commute 17 miles each way from Arlington since that's where my ex settled to attend graduate school," she responded. Jason asked, "Would you be willing to commute to downtown Dallas if I could arrange it with the chief information officer? It's about the same distance, and you could either drive or take the light rail to our office." Annie Ngo thought to herself, "I've never met anyone interesting in North America before, but Jason is an exception. He's older and not particularly handsome, but he can help advance my career and be an engaging companion. Plus, he could serve as another male role model for my 5-year-old if he spends time with me. I know my mom would adore him because she likes driven, focused men." She smiled broadly and said, "Just say the word, Mr. Regional Guru, and I'll be in your office by next Monday." After Jason had returned Annie to the branch office, courteously interacted, and discussed work matters with both Harry Brown and Marvin Banks, he headed back to Dallas, navigating the light traffic typical of a mid-afternoon. Once there, he went directly to his office. At 4 p.m., Jason found himself sitting across from the CIO, Ms. Chihuahua. Nancy Parks found it particularly embarrassing that Jason, who was now her subordinate, had once been her French 101 instructor during her younger years. Parks had repeatedly dropped the course because she just couldn't conjugate a French verb. Back then, the petite woman was notorious on campus for her reputation in the sorority. She later changed her major to information systems, becoming skilled in widely used office computer applications. Nancy had a husband whom she never brought to company events, rumored to be her submissive, and had climbed the ranks from an accounting clerk to an executive position. She was small in stature, spoke with a rough edge, and office gossip suggested she advanced her career through her relationships, remaining attractive in the process. She cleverly dodged accountability for significant mistakes, at least in the eyes of the influential men on the top floor. Jason wasn't sure if the rumors were true, but he, and everyone else, knew she was ill-suited for her role. He was also aware that she had allies in the executive suite who shielded her while she handled responsibilities beyond her capability. Consequently, Jason and Nancy maintained a superficially cordial relationship, both hiding their mutual frustration, as it was clear she would remain his superior for the foreseeable future. Jason and Nancy spent an hour going over his findings in Fort Worth before Jason proposed, "Nancy, the solution to our persistent software issues is to extend Ms. Ngo's contract for another 90 days, this time as a contract programmer instead of an admin clerk. The raise will incentivize her, and since we both speak her native language fluently, she is capable and motivated to make the necessary fixes while I document the server and workstation applications. Ultimately, we'll have a professional-grade software product that we can all take pride in, including your colleagues upstairs. Initially wary of Jason's intentions, Nancy inquired, "How long have you known this Vietnamese woman, Mr. Crawford?" Jason checked his watch and replied, "It's been about 4 hours since I met her. Marvin Banks hired her as a clerk, but when she began troubleshooting workstations, he reassigned her to Harry Brown, where she's been for 2 months. Nancy, I'm confident that the two of us can transform the proprietary software into a reliable, professional application that users won't have to worry about." The CIO thought to herself, "Wow, this is an intriguing possibility, and this guy might actually pull it off." She responded, "Hold on a moment, Mr. Crawford." She opened a spreadsheet on her computer, reviewed it for a few minutes while taking notes, and then said, "All right, Jason. You and Ms. Ngo have 90 days to achieve this miracle you mentioned. I'll request Marvin Banks to upgrade and renew her contract for another 90 days and allocate her to our team." Feeling uneasy that she might reconsider, Jason quickly left her office halfway through his exit. At 4:15, Jill Crawford sat on a piano bench, working through a piece of music she had intended to learn several weeks earlier. Raleigh Harrison, a well-respected keyboardist and instructor from the North Texas State Music Department, frowned slightly at her approach to the composition he had created during his student years. He interrupted her, saying, "Remember to use your pinky finger, Jill, when you reach for that C sharp." Jill smiled warmly and said, "I'm not really up for a lesson today, Raleigh. I asked Jason for a divorce yesterday, and he agreed just like that. Isn't that something?" Harrison's immediate thought was, "Oh no, that's a regular client gone. Or maybe I can keep her interested in these lessons for a bit longer." He considered his options, thinking it might be best to find another committed student who genuinely wanted to improve. The two decided to take a break from the piano lesson, opting to continue their conversation in another room. At that moment, the garage door lifted, signaling Jason's unexpected return home, even though he had originally intended to work late in Fort Lauderdale. Worth. The couple had been playing loud big band jazz music and hadn't heard the garage door open. Consequently, their passionate embrace continued without interruption. As the husband walked past the guest bedroom door towards his home office, he noticed the booming music coming from behind it. He knocked loudly and yelled, "Can you please turn that blasted music down?" He then proceeded to his office and addressed the branch's application software failures reported that day. Upon reviewing them, he muttered to himself, "Oh no. The CEO will be furious when he sees this, but the Chihuahua will calm him down while he's enjoying her charms. She'll reassure him that a solution is on the way." Jason barely realized that the music had ceased. He glanced out the window, rubbing his face as he thought while composing a company email, and saw the piano teacher hurrying across the lawn toward his car, his shirt unbuttoned, holding his shoes in one hand and his music portfolio in the other. The young man reached his sedan, parked on the street, and sped away. Jason continued drafting a comprehensive summary of the plan for Annie Ngo and his upcoming project. Suddenly, Jill burst into the office with frizzy hair and a house coat wrapped around her. She said, "Jason, our attorney has prepared a standard divorce form and asked that you and I sit down to detail each asset and debt, along with notes on how each will be divided. He advised us to be as thorough as possible in our descriptions." Jason looked up at her and replied, "I can set aside what I'm working on right now. Let's work on it together if you'd like." She responded, "Great idea. My piano teacher's trio is performing at a lounge in the International tonight, and I'd like to go support him once we're finished." 2 hours later, they had settled their disagreements in writing, Essentially, they had divided their assets and expenses nearly equally when Jason said, "You're about to become a partner and start earning a significant income. So, how about we split the net proceeds from the fair market value of our house 75-25 in my favor? And let me buy you out. I'll also transfer the Runaway Bay Resort property to you through a quitclaim deed." Jill's initial reaction was, "Is that bastard trying to pull a fast one on me?" But wait, my lover and I could sneak away there many weekends. She then agreed, saying, "Okay," and made notes of the changes on the attorney's draft. She looked at her husband of 22 years and said, "Thank you for being a gentleman, dear husband, and for understanding these matters. I'm going to write a note to our children explaining what we're doing. Will you sign it with me?" Her husband replied, "Sure, as long as neither of us is blamed. They're both smart kids and will understand that we were never a compound, just a mixture. But we've had some good times too, right?" Jill smiled broadly and extended her hand. "Right." On the following Monday, Annie Ngo navigated to the downtown Dallas parking garage using the GPS directions Jason had provided. She inserted her ticket, causing the barrier to lift, and then found a parking spot. As she stepped onto the air-conditioned catwalk leading to the building housing the insurance company's offices, she spotted Jason Crawford waiting for her. They both shared smiles, sensing that something exciting was about to unfold that day. Jason was surprised by his own need to resist the urge to embrace the exceptionally stylish woman before him. Annie had a unique talent for wearing outfits not commonly seen in the area, likely sourced from France or made by her mother. With minimal makeup, her naturally radiant complexion stood out. In his mid-40s, Jason hadn't expected to feel such an immediate attraction, and he thought, "Well, this is a pleasant surprise." Jason handed Annie a magnetic parking card for future use, along with $15 to cover today's ticket. Speaking in French, he explained, "This card will be active starting tomorrow, so make sure to pay the cashier when you leave this afternoon. Now, come with me, and I'll show you to our workspace and introduce you to a few people, starting with HR to obtain a magnetic key for the company office door." After Annie settled into her workspace, Jason approached her cubicle and asked, "Are you ready to meet some people?" She grinned and replied, "Yes." "It's amazing to be here. Thank you so much for this opportunity." He returned her smile and said, "Actually, it's our opportunity to work some magic. The next 3 months are going to benefit both your career and mine." He observed her warm smile. They ascended 4 floors using the stairs and approached the office of the Vice President of Sales. Jason inquired with the receptionist, "Is he available and do you have a moment for me?" Upon entering, Jason greeted, "Mr. Graves, you wanted to understand why the Fort Worth branch experiences almost no issues with our proprietary software. Let me introduce you to the reason, Annie Ngo." The white-haired man looked up from his report, focused on his 2 guests, and a broad smile spread across his face. Graves stood up, walked around to shake both visitors' hands, and said, "If my sales team could concentrate solely on selling instead of dealing with computer issues, I could retire 2 years earlier without worry. We're relying on you, Ms. Ngo, based on the excellent report I've heard from Marvin Banks. Welcome aboard." The final office they visited belonged to Nancy Parks from Chihuahua. Upon their entrance, she remained seated, observing the new visitor thoughtfully. Parks greeted them with a polite smile and said, "We're excited for you to expand your miracle project in Fort Lauderdale. Worth across the entire company, Ms. No." Annie responded in basic English, saying, "Thank you for the opportunity to prove myself with Mr. Crawford's assistance." Later, Jason and Annie went out for lunch, where they were introduced to several co-workers while enjoying pad thai at a local noodle restaurant. The afternoon passed quickly as they worked together in a small conference room planning their project. Occasionally, employees would peek in with curious expressions upon hearing them speak French. By 6 p.m., The day had flown by for both of them. Neither felt ready to end the day because they had thoroughly enjoyed each other's company. Jason remarked, "Traffic starts to ease up around 6:30, Annie. Let's wrap things up after we outline this phase, okay?" Jill Crawford took a day off from work and visited their attorney's office to discuss her and Jason's upcoming separation arrangements. Bart Masters, their usual lawyer, was unavailable for this administrative task, so his young protégé, Anthony Baker, who had recently joined the firm, assisted her. Jill had met Anthony previously and appreciated his professional support in helping her and Jason execute their will. Noting Anthony's friendly demeanor, Jill enjoyed their light-hearted conversation as they reviewed the property division draft. "Hello, Miss Crawford. Your attorney is deposing someone today and has asked me to review your draft regarding the property division that will be included in your and your husband's decree," Anthony said as he settled into the modest conference room with Jill. They reviewed each item while Jill provided background details and Anthony took notes. Throughout their conversation, Anthony occasionally glanced at Jill, appreciating her warm and engaging manner. After they discussed the final item on the list, Anthony paused and, with a smile, asked, "Would you be interested in dinner sometime?" "My schedule today is packed, but I'd love to meet up." Jill thought about it, realizing her evening was free, and agreed, saying, "That sounds nice, Anthony. I'll meet you there around 7. That evening, Jill arrived at a stylish high-rise in downtown Dallas, impressed by the lively surroundings. "This area would be so convenient if I end up moving to the city," she thought to herself as she stepped inside. After an enjoyable dinner, they returned to Anthony's apartment, where they continued their friendly conversation on his couch. The evening wrapped up, and Jill left feeling refreshed, knowing she had taken a positive step toward the next chapter in her life. On her way home, she reflected, "I love the excitement of new experiences and meeting new people. Maybe I really am ready to start fresh." Though a sense of hesitation surfaced, she felt ready to move forward confidently, inspired by the possibilities ahead. When Jill returned home, she noticed a light shining beneath Jason's office door and paused nearby. For reasons she couldn't understand, she began to sweat despite her freshly cleaned body. Nevertheless, she knocked and entered immediately, greeting him with, "Hello, Jason." Jason glanced up but stayed focused on the report displayed on his screen. He remained silent, only shrugging his shoulders in a questioning manner. Jill continued, "The final document will be ready for our signatures by tomorrow afternoon. Anthony mentioned that if we come by to sign after 4 o'clock, it can be filed the next day. Of course, we should both review it again to ensure there are no mistakes." Jason responded, "I'll handle that tomorrow evening." "Thanks, Jill, and good night." Jill tried to initiate a conversation with Jason, but it was clear he wasn't interested in talking. She asked, "Have you heard from the children today?" "No, Jill. I'm sure they're both very busy, just like me." She reluctantly shut the door, feeling that being alone away from others had always been a hidden burden, a secret she guarded fiercely from everyone. A month had passed, and Jason and Annie and Go were enjoying a meal together when Jason shared, "I'm officially moved out. I've secured an apartment now that my ex-wife and I have finalized the sale of our house. My furniture's all in storage, so after 22 years I'm single again. Annie, would you like to make it official and be my girlfriend?" Annie, practicing her English, tried to express, "Let's go back to your place and enjoy some time together," but, unable to find the right words, switched to French. Jason laughed and replied, "Then what are we waiting for?" They both burst into laughter. Annie teased, "Before you can spend time with me, you need your energy. So eat your vegetables." Once they arrived at his new apartment, Annie looked around, impressed, and said, "Wow." "You're going to live in style, Jason. This place is beautiful, and it's perfect being close to the office. I used to love walking to the campus in Strasbourg on nice days. Jason remarked, "There's actually another reason for having all this space." Annie suggested, "How about you make us a drink while I freshen up?" She took her overnight bag and stepped into the master bedroom. Jason, preparing drinks, turned around to see Annie waiting with a warm smile. Instantly, they both felt the depth of their connection. She placed a hand on his arm and asked softly, "Would you like to just savor this moment with me?" They both laughed, enjoying the peace of just being in each other's presence, and relaxed into each other's company. Later, as they shared stories and exchanged memories, Jason thought about how much he admired Annie's clarity and sense of purpose. As they lay together, Annie's expression grew thoughtful, and she said, "Jason, we both admire each other, but what I truly need is a relationship that's deeply grounded. I know we're drawn to each other, but true love requires something lasting. I need a relationship built on a solid foundation, and you deserve that too." Jason looked at her, both surprised and grateful for her honesty, thinking, "Wow, she really understands what she wants and needs." He nodded, knowing they'd both gained something meaningful from their time together. She placed her finger gently on his lips to silence him and said, "That's a conversation for another time. Can we change the subject?" He responded with a resigned smile and said, "All right, leader. You lead the way." She hesitated for a moment, seemingly unsure whether to continue, but then said, "It's time I reveal my true reason for seducing you, Jason." Crawford looked confused and asked, "Do you want to tell me?" She replied, "I want you to invite me to stay over 1 or 2 nights each week because I absolutely detest the 50-minute drive to and from Arlington, and Mom enjoys taking care of Marcus every day." This admission was somewhat surprising, even though they had become close friends. He was impressed that she had been honest, and felt disappointed that her interest wasn't based on his attractiveness. Jason said, "Of course, what you're saying makes perfect sense. I realize now that I was completely infatuated with you because of your incredible abilities, and after some reflection, I remembered that my marriage 22 years ago was based on my college sweetheart and our mutual admiration for each other's talents. Admiration isn't love, and so after years of a loveless marriage, I'm ready to jump into another similar relationship. Thank you for helping me see that." There was a brief silence as they both smiled at each other. Jason's partner then said, "Changing the topic, why do you live in such a spacious apartment?" Jason relaxed and answered, "The grand opening specials offered a 3-bedroom unit for the price of a 2-bedroom for the first year, so I took it because of its location. But, in my wildest dreams, as I watched you think things through every day, I hoped that you, your mom, and your child would eventually move in with me. Your rent would stay the same as it is now, and you could use the second reserved parking spot." Annie was finding herself drawn to Jason more and more, realizing he was becoming the kind of person she truly admired and cared for. She felt a renewed closeness and affection, and their connection grew even deeper as they shared the evening together, enjoying each other's company and presence. Afterward, as they lay side by side, Annie turned to him with a warm smile and suggested, "How about having a Vietnamese dinner with me and my family in our Arlington apartment sometime?" Jason lifted his head with a tired but happy smile. "Just let me know when and where, and what I can bring." 2 weeks later, Jason was on his way to Arlington thinking, "I'm really enjoying these moments with Annie. I just don't know how I'll manage to keep my life separate from hers." He parked in the visitor's spot of her apartment complex, a welcoming middle-class building with steel mesh stairways leading to the 2nd floor, where the Nyo's lived. As soon as he knocked, Annie opened the door, her face lighting up. "Come on in, Jason. Mom and I have been cooking all day, and we hope there's something here you'll enjoy." She then lowered her voice to a whisper, adding, "Mom doesn't know we're close, so tonight's just about a family meal together. Let me introduce you to Marcus and my mom. Raleigh Harrison carefully carried his 88-key Yamaha keyboard into Jill Crawford's second bedroom. After setting it up, he plugged it into his computer and couldn't help but smile at the rich sound coming through the speakers. He turned to Jill, who was watching him with a wide grin, and asked, "Could you help me unload the rest of my sheet music and bags from the car? After that, I'll need a shower, and maybe you can join me." "All right," Jill laughed. "Let's get your stuff in here, and then I'll arrange a parking spot for you with the building manager." Later, as they stood under the warm shower spray, Jill asked, "Raleigh, I know we're not exclusive, but please promise not to bring any other dates into my home, okay?" Raleigh chuckled. "You wear me out so much I doubt I'd have the energy for anyone else." She laughed and added, "True, I do keep you busy, but I hope none of those young fans at your gigs ever tempt you." They shared a tender moment, but soon Raleigh remembered his evening performance. "I'll have to be quick," he said, wrapping up and drying off. After he left, Jill took another shower to freshen up before her dinner with Anthony, a charming attorney she'd been seeing casually. Anthony had promised to cook, saying, "I'm quite the chef, especially with Italian. Would you like to join me for dinner?" Grateful for the invitation, Jill thought, just what I need after today, a delicious meal. Over dinner, Jill was delighted. "Anthony, this meal is fantastic. I hope I get invited back for more." Anthony smiled, confidence brimming. "Keep being your amazing self, and I'm all yours in the kitchen, and otherwise." Jill's tone grew serious. "Since my divorce is underway, I've made a promise to myself. No more secrets or hidden agendas." Sensing the shift in conversation, Anthony laughed lightly. "Good thing you didn't go into law. Honesty suits you better." Jill continued, "My roommate moved in today. He's a pianist, performs at night, and we've been close for a while. When he's away, like for a gig in Austin, I enjoy our time together. But if you're looking for exclusivity, I respect that, and I want to be upfront." Anthony's face showed a mix of emotions, and he finally said, "Part of me really admires your honesty, but another part of me is looking for something deeper, lasting." Pausing, he added thoughtfully, "Jill, I'd gotten the sense you were searching for real love after leaving your marriage." Jill felt a mix of emotions as she looked up at Anthony. "Thanks for the fantastic dinner, Anthony. I think I should head back now," she said. "But if you change your mind about us, I'll be down the hall." Later, Jill settled at her computer, diving into work on her company's pension project via a secure connection. She was analyzing financial data for her client's chief investment officer, ensuring that the company could meet pension payments for both current and future retirees. She faced two major concerns. She doubted that the firm's profits would be enough to keep the pension plan adequately funded each quarter, and analysts had already flagged that retirees might not receive their full benefits if current trends continued. With zero interest rates and declining profitability, the situation seemed bleak. Jill drafted a cover letter to accompany her report, feeling the weight of the issue. Just then, a knock interrupted her concentration. She took a deep breath, leaving her work behind as she glanced through the peephole to see Anthony waiting outside. Letting him in, she quickly relaxed and felt her stresses begin to melt away as he wrapped her in a warm hug. Their connection allowed her a break from the complexities of her day and the intense reality of her job. Later, after an evening that left her feeling deeply cared for, Jill realized the time. "Thank you for making me feel so special tonight, Anthony," she said. "But my roommate will be back soon, so I'd better get cleaned up." Annie Ngo and Jason Crawford stood at the open door of an apartment in Arlington. When Annie's mother entered from the kitchen, Jason was amazed by how much she resembled Annie. The cheerful mother was slightly taller and showed only subtle signs of aging on her face and arms. She had dyed her hair a glossy black, ensuring that no gray strands were visible to anyone. Jason pondered, Annie's mom hasn't gained weight over the years, yet she must be my age or older. How is that possible? The mother held the hand of a child who didn't appear very Asian and looked at Jason with a confused expression. Annie introduced them by saying, "Jason, this is my mom, Helen Ngo, and my son, Marcus Thompson." She pointed to Jason and continued, "Mom and Marcus, this is my close friend and supervisor, Jason Crawford. He'll be my supervisor for at least another 2 months. When I can't come home after work, I stay in one of the 2 extra bedrooms in his spacious apartment in North Dallas." The former French professor gazed at Helen, captivated by the mother of his casual partner, but remained silent as they shook hands. Jason thought to himself, "God, I might fall deeply in love with her." Helen welcomed him warmly, saying, "Welcome to our home, Jason. Annie has told me so much about you that I feel like I already know you." Jason responded, "I plan to get to know you as well as you've come to know me through Annie." He then knelt down and extended his hand to her grandson. "Hello, Marcus. I hope we can become good friends. I think your mom is amazing." The 5-year-old responded flawlessly in French, saying, "You're the first boyfriend Mom has introduced me to, so you must be someone special. I don't think we'll have any trouble becoming friends. Plus, you're a native English speaker." Jason was taken aback by the child's response and, upon standing up, thought to himself, "She's 5?" Their small living room featured 2 large original paintings on adjacent walls. One depicted the back of a young girl with only a veil covering her lower body, standing before a waterfall. Jason approached the artwork, mesmerized by its effect on him, and remarked, "This is a beautiful painting. Oil on canvas, correct?" Helen answered, "Yes. I painted Annie as she was drying off in front of this waterfall. We had been swimming in the pool below the falls, and she was my live model. I created this when she was around 12 years old." Neither Helen nor Jason realized how close they had become to one another. Jason felt a persistent lump in his throat as he kept glancing at Annie's mother. His initial reaction was, "What's happening here?" He then looked at Annie, who wore a calm expression as if to say, "This is exactly what I expected might happen." Annie thought, "These 2 are drawn to each other because they have similar personalities, and the only common ground between Jason and me is that we're both into technology. Why am I not surprised? This is wonderful. It's clear that I'm just history for Jason. His romantic attention is now turning towards Mom, even if he doesn't realize it yet. Meanwhile, Mom is terrified that this man will choose to be with me and leave her life. If Mr. Crawford stops desiring me, it will confirm that he's fixated on Mom. Make it happen, Annie." There was a brief pause, and Annie added, "Mom is the president of the Mid-Cities Artists Association." Trying to maintain the conversation while the 2 middle-aged adults looked at each other, she continued, "Marcus spends every other weekend with his dad and is already fluent in both French and English, even though he's in preschool." Finally, Helen nervously said, "After you've freshened up, come to the kitchen and select a small portion of each of the 8 dishes to taste what you like and don't like. We'll all sit at that table to eat." Jason enjoyed 5 of the dishes, finding 2 of them exceptionally delicious. Helen provided him with the Vietnamese names for each dish and explained, "These dishes don't have English names, but you can order them at a restaurant by mentioning the main ingredient." During dinner, the conversation was light and often included Marcus. The 5-year-old's quick thinking continued to surprise Jason. Mr. Crawford had to consciously avoid staring at Helen Ngo, and he sensed that she was also struggling to look away from him. After a very pleasant evening filled with conversation, dinner, and 2 glasses of wine, the 3 accompanied Jason to the front door to bid good night. At the open door, Jason said, "I'd like to take you all out to dinner next weekend if you let me know what you'd really like to eat. I'll have it catered since I can't cook. What do you think?" Annie replied, "Yes, we'd love that. Just serve what you and I have for lunch and that's fine. However, Jason, next weekend's visit would be without Marcus. If that's okay, Mom could take the light rail to Dallas, and we can pick her up in front of our office. What do you say, Mr. Crawford?" Jill was stirred awake by the soft, rhythmic notes of a piano coming from the living room. Raleigh had returned home and was unwinding with some gentle playing. Though he kept the volume low, the music reached Jill in the master bedroom, blending with her own restless thoughts. As he played, Raleigh mused to himself, "How did I end up here with Jill Crawford, my landlady? Especially after meeting her young new friend tonight. She's attractive, has her life sorted, and even took piano lessons growing up. But Raleigh, stay focused. Life has a way of working things out." Just then, the door creaked open, and Jill entered, softly massaging his shoulders. "That feels nice," Raleigh said with a grin. Jill replied, "I bet you'd feel even better if you joined me in the bedroom." Smiling, Raleigh turned off the keyboard, took her hand, and walked her back to the master bedroom. Jill laughed as she playfully balanced on his feet while they walked. Though the two shared a closeness, Raleigh's mind drifted back to the young woman he'd met earlier that evening. She had invited him to join her and her friends during his break, sharing an enthusiasm for piano that clearly drew her to him. She'd even left him her contact information with a warm smile, hoping to see him play again soon. Meanwhile, Jill found herself lost in a loop of mixed feelings. She enjoyed their closeness, but felt weighed down by work stresses that had lingered unresolved. While being with Raleigh often helped her unwind, tonight her worries persisted. Suddenly she was struck by a realization. "I feel more lost than I ever did before. Where did I go wrong? I thought someone with my sense of direction wouldn't face a dilemma like this." On an unseasonably warm Friday afternoon, sluggish clouds drifted over Dallas West End. Jason and Annie decided to leave the office early, taking a walk to relax outside with iced beverages, while enjoying the gentle breeze beneath a shaded tree until it was time to pick up Annie's mother, Helen. During their time together, they discussed work-related matters, specifically how the test user group was ensuring the reliability of the recent updates to the proprietary software on the test server and workstations. Annie mentioned, "Only 6 code changes were needed or requested by the test users last week, so we're making good progress, Jason." The middle-aged man with a liberal arts background who had transitioned into a tech role smiled and replied, "I've been swamped with other tasks and have fallen behind on the documentation, but I'll get back on track." She added, "I'm telling you this because I have 2 local job interviews next week and a conference call with a firm in Houston. I won't end my contract until we finish our project. You know, the Chihuahua might give me a bonus. Do you think that's possible?" Jason responded, "Well, the test team leader is well liked by the CIO, and the 2 women often spend evenings socializing with the men on the top floor. I know the test team leader got flustered when she successfully inserted a JPG into a form and was amazed that it worked. The flawless claim form was completed right after we deployed our latest revision on the test server. The Chihuahua is also pleased that the test users highly appreciate the software changes and the dedicated work we've done. Drumroll, please, it works. So with Annie's influence, maybe Ms. Parks will give you a bonus." She smiled and replied, "I couldn't have done it without you, Jason. Not only with the software, but I also feel almost comfortable with interviewing now. Since you've been drilling me day and night, my English skills have improved significantly. Pick any verb, Jason, and listen to me conjugate it." Jason tested her with 2 verbs, which she handled effortlessly, and they both grinned widely. "How can I ever thank you, Mr. Crawford?" Jason smiled and said, "You thank me every time you ignite my passion, and because you've introduced me." He didn't finish his sentence as he watched Annie place her fingers to her lips in a shh gesture. Annie replied, "Both of us have emerged from loveless marriages, and were wise enough not to repeat that mistake. So we cherished the moments of holding each other in the meantime. Jason thought, since she used the past tense, Annie will no longer sleep in my bed. Oh no. I'll miss her, or will I? This woman used 2 naive American men to get here before she met me and then relied on me to prepare herself for the job market, and I must admit she has given me back my youth in return. It's an excellent deal for me. He unconsciously raised his margarita glass in her honor, quietly smiling into her eyes as he continued thinking, I hope she finds someone of her caliber to love and be loved by. Her mother, and her father before, must have been remarkable individuals who instilled in her a strong work ethic and survival skills, which form the foundation of her towering self-confidence and abilities. They also passed on good genes. She became the person she is while pursuing her goals, even as she was raised in a collectivist environment. He glanced at his watch and said, Annie, thank you for being in my life these past few weeks. But it's time we go get the car and pick up your mom at the train station. Later, her mother walked toward them on the platform, smiling broadly. Jason then noticed that Helen was wearing a dress identical to the one Annie had on today. The autumn colors of their outfits, suitable for the cooler afternoon, perfectly flattered both women's figures. Smiling, Jason concluded, Annie's mother designed and made those dresses. Clearly, this middle-aged woman possesses artistic talent. As Helen approached, a lump formed in Jason's throat, and he gripped his trousers to prevent himself from grabbing her and kissing her hello. He noticed she was carrying a small bag and a purse, clenching both with white-knuckled hands. When she reached them, Jason gave her a light kiss on the cheek and said, Welcome, Helen. Struggling to speak clearly, she responded in British English. Thank you, Jason, and thank you for the invitation. Marcus threw a tantrum because he wanted to come with me instead of getting into his father's car, but I promised him he would be invited next time. Did I say something wrong? Jason relaxed and remarked, Not at all. Absolutely, either Marcus or both of you can come visit me with one or both of the ladies any time. However, as a man, I believe that divorced parents care deeply for their children staying with the ex, and the child should fully understand that. She responded, I agree, and that was exactly my point, to encourage him to go with his dad without causing a scene. Regarding the invitation, Annie mentioned that you don't play around with words, so I take it you genuinely invited me? He held Helen's free hand while maintaining eye contact and said, Yes, I don't mince words. Shifting the conversation, he added, All right, ladies, whoever wants to drive home and enjoy a glass of wine before the caterer brings our dinner, please come this way. Since neither of you placed any orders, we have a barbecue meat combo with sauce and vegetables on the side in case someone doesn't prefer the sauce. When the trio arrived at Jason's apartment, they playfully drank wine, enjoyed their catered meal, and engaged in light conversation. Annie then said, I'm going to say goodnight and head to my office. I need to update my resume and browse Monster again in my search for the perfect job. Jason replied, Good night, Annie. I hope you and your mom will be comfortable sleeping in the full-size bed there. She kissed him on the cheek and added, I have no doubt that all 3 of us will have pleasant dreams. When they were alone, Jason asked Helen, Could you tell me about your late husband? Helen responded, Of course. We spent over a year trying to have Annie, and we finally succeeded. He loved our daughter so deeply that he devoted every free moment to her. Both my husband and I were fluent in French and began teaching her the language from a young age. However, it was mostly his example that influenced her. She idolized him as she grew up. Annie had a tough time in both primary and secondary school and didn't form any close friendships, often saying, My classmates are unbearably boring. The 3 of us participated in countless family activities together. She excelled in the entrance exams for the University of Strasbourg and tearfully said goodbye to both her father and me. Although she received a full scholarship, we also provided her with some additional monthly support. Jason then asked, "Can you tell me about her father's death?" Helen replied, "No, it's best not to discuss it. All I can say is that he died from arsenic oxide poisoning. Within a week, the French embassy arranged for me to fly to Strasbourg at the expense of the American embassy to be with Annie, and I haven't returned to my homeland since." Jason held her hand and said, "You don't need to say anything more, Helen. I can understand the rest of the tragedy now. I'm just grateful that you're here with me." She smiled warmly and said, "Thank you, Jason. You should know that I usually feel calm and composed, especially around you. I have my late husband's modest early passing while on duty, a retirement pension from your government, and I immerse myself in art. Occasionally someone buys one of my pieces, which helps me get by. In that sense, I'm different from Annie. She's determined to succeed at any cost, while I simply want to live and enjoy my art. I also love taking care of my grandson because he means the world to me, and his Asian features remind me so much of my late husband. I have every confidence that Marcus will become the Uberman his grandpa was, and go if he chooses to be." Jason reflected, thinking, Helen is a survivor, and she must believe that Annie has been exchanging intimacy since her college days to get what she needed, including being my lover. Yet Helen seems unfazed and tells me she's not like her daughter in that respect. This makes me like Helen even more, and I'm willing to bet that the only man she's ever been with was her late husband. He smiled, satisfied with his thoughts, and added, "I agree that Marcus will achieve success in life." After 15 minutes of discussing local politics, he said, "It's getting late, Helen, so let me wish you good night. Let's continue this conversation in the morning, okay? The bedroom you share with Annie also serves as her workspace and has an attached bathroom. I'm looking forward to the 2 or 3 of us visiting tomorrow morning. For example, I've never been to Dallas's most famous landmark, the School Book Depository, which is now a museum." "Would you like to go?" she exclaimed with the same childlike joy that Annie would show. "I've wanted to do that since elementary school. Let's please do it." The next morning, the trio took a walking tour of the first settlement log cabin and then visited the Texas School Book Depository building. Afterwards, Helen remarked, "We were taught in school to celebrate the tragedy, but at home, we mourned it privately every year." The group was sitting under the same shade tree finishing lunch, where Annie and Jason had been waiting for Helen on Friday. Then Annie's cell phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID, excused herself from her companions, and answered in English with the speakerphone on. "Yes, Richard." They all heard Richard say, "I want to go fishing with some friends and spend the night on the lake east of Dallas. Marcus wouldn't be welcome, so can I bring him home early?" She placed the phone on hold and looked at Jason, who simply shook his head with a smile and said, "Fine with me." She then instructed, "Just drop him in his car seat off at an apartment building near downtown Dallas at this address on your way to the lake. Pack him a change of clothes and pajamas. I'll wait while you get a pencil to write this down." Later, after returning to Jason's apartment, there was a knock at the door. Marcus rushed in and approached the man he thought was his mother's new boyfriend. Jason, who had been sitting at his computer, stood up, picked Marcus up, and said, "Hello, Marcus. I'm so happy to see you." The child immediately froze and looked directly at the man holding him. He said, "You are happy to see me, aren't you, Mr. Crawford?" Jason was taken aback by Marcus's assertiveness, but smiled broadly as he set the child down and replied, "Yes, I truly mean everything I say to you and everyone else." Marcus smiled widely. Jill Crawford attended an urgent meeting in the office of the managing partner at her firm. Upon entering the large conference space, she felt an unease that intensified as she noticed 2 colleagues she didn't know well, both actuaries. The senior partner began, "Thank you all for joining us. We're implementing cost-saving measures in response to current market pressures and reduced workloads. Regrettably, this means offering you each a buyout of 6 months' salary, effective immediately, or allowing you to remain with the firm for up to 6 months while seeking other employment. Mrs. Grimes in Personnel will have the details for each of you. We truly value your service, and I'll gladly provide letters of recommendation as you navigate this change." He nodded, signaling the meeting's end. Jill returned home feeling shocked, unsettled by the uncertain road ahead. Her late mother's words about choices and consequences echoed in her mind. Still dazed, she arrived at her apartment and saw her roommate, Raleigh, was home. She remembered how brief moments of affection with him often allowed her to forget her worries temporarily. But as Jill entered, she noticed an unfamiliar voice from behind Raleigh's bedroom door. When she opened it, she found Raleigh and a young woman, both looking startled. Jill said, "I thought we had agreed not to bring anyone else here." Her voice taut with frustration. Raleigh quickly tried to smooth things over. "Jill, I'm sorry. This was just a piano lesson gone a little too far." Jill, feeling disrespected, told him she wanted him out by the end of the month. The next day, the weight of everything overwhelmed her. She felt alone, facing a turning point in her life, with no one to lean on. She needed to make real changes, but wasn't sure where to begin. In her desperation, she reached out to Anthony, a young attorney she'd been seeing, to see if he'd consider moving in to help share expenses. His response was blunt. "I'm not interested in being part of a shared space with multiple partners. Goodbye, Jill." His abrupt departure left her feeling embarrassed, ashamed, and lonelier than ever. As the weeks went by, her work project wound down, and she faced a countdown of 5 months until her severance would run out. One night, she shared her concerns with Raleigh over dinner, hoping he might offer support, but his response was indifferent. He admitted he couldn't even pay the previous month's rent due to low earnings, signaling that she was on her own. The following week, Jill returned home from a work trip to find Raleigh had moved out without a word, leaving behind his keys and a month's unpaid rent. Alone in her apartment, Jill realized the challenges ahead and knew that real change would have to come from within. The Chihuahua walked into Annie and Jason's workspace with a smile. Annie was there alone, updating her resume. The CIO approached her and said, "Annie, the team and I would like to treat you to lunch today. Are you interested?" Annie beamed and replied, "Wonderful. Thank you." During lunch, the CIO stood up and announced, "Annie, every site is reporting no errors since you implemented your version of the proprietary software. The board and management appreciate your efforts, and so do I. I even managed to secure a little bonus for you from the CEO. And trust me, it felt like alligators were flying when he approved it." Laughter filled the table as he passed the check to her, and everyone applauded Annie and the CIO's humor. After work, Jason arrived from Oklahoma City and drove to his reserved parking spot. He then noticed Annie's car in her usual numbered space. Smiling, he quickly headed to his apartment. At his door, Helen, Annie, and Marcus greeted him with smiles. The temporary worker exclaimed, "Surprise! Jason, I received that nice bonus from the Chihuahua today thanks to you, and I'm taking us out to dinner tonight." As the evening progressed, wine was poured, and laughter echoed among the adults while the child concentrated on a game on his iPad. Jason observed that Helen was slightly tipsy from her wine. Annie, who had also had a bit too much to drink, whispered, "Jason, I have a secret. Mom wants to sleep in your bed tonight. Would that be okay?" Heh. Jason, completely sober, responded, "That's fine, but I think it would be better if your mom told me that directly instead of you." Annie agreed, saying, "You're right, I'm sorry. On another note, I received a job offer. but the starting salary in this industry isn't great, so I'm waiting before making a decision. I hope to get 1 or 2 more offers. My last paycheck from the insurance company is next Friday, which is a week from today. That night, Annie and her mother went to Annie's workspace to sleep. Jason lay awake for an hour, watching the blades of the Casablanca fan slowly rotate above him. He couldn't fall asleep as he pondered his emotions. Do I love her, or am I just infatuated with her daughter's remarkable talents and projecting that onto her mother? The following morning, everyone apologized for getting a bit tipsy the night before, but no one brought up Annie's obvious and embarrassing remark. On Saturday, the 4 spent their time playing card games. Once again, Jason was amazed at how proficient the 5-year-old was at both games of chance and skill-based games. It suddenly struck Jason, wow, these people are now a part of my life. That evening, after watching a 1940s movie, everyone went to bed, and Jason found himself staring at the ceiling once more. Suddenly, he got up, walked down the hallway to Annie's room, and knocked on the door. Annie opened it and stepped aside to let Jason enter freely. The man in his mid-40s walked over to the bed where Helen was lying and smiled at her, and she smiled back. He asked, "Helen, would you like to spend the night in my bed?" Helen smiled and reached out to take his offered hand, allowing him to help her stand. The 2 people in their 40s walked hand in hand down the hallway toward Jason's bedroom, while Annie continued teaching herself Swift, a new programming language. Annie accepted a position located an hour north of Dallas. Jason assisted in relocating her and Marcus from Arlington to a new apartment in McKinney, and also helped her mother move into his own place. Over time, Jason and Helen became each other's significant others, and he successfully added her to his health insurance plan. Helen transformed the 2nd bedroom into an art studio, much to Jason's delight. Jill was unsuccessful in securing a position as an actuary, so she took a job as a financial analyst with a significantly lower salary once her previous job ended. She enjoyed the companionship and affection of several young men for brief periods, but as the months passed and her calendar filled up, these encounters became less frequent. Eventually, she found herself engaging in casual relationships as a means of survival. Often, she would find herself looking through old family photographs.